Okay, so now we shift gears to looking at the people who were involved in the pre-planning, the ideation of this atrocity, and the deception that's been imposed on us about this. I call it a crime in progress, or an ongoing crime, because the crime happened on September 11th, 2001, but ever since then, there's been a criminal deception, a criminal cover-up of what happened that day. And that cover-up has been, foisted upon us or done by the U.S. government and the media. So for 13 years, we've been living in this artificial reality where their lies fly, and we've been given just a pack of lies. But those pack of lies are very dangerous because they have taken us to war on those lies. Now, here are the three characters that came to power in Israel in the late 70s. The guy in the middle with the glasses is Menachem Begin, and Yitzhak Shamir over there on the far side, and here is Ariel Sharon. These men are bona fide de facto terrorists and have been terrorists their whole adult lives. What they did in 1975, they created a coalition party called the Likud Coalition, which is the coalition that runs Israel today. Benjamin Netanyahu is part of that coalition, and that coalition was comprised of the former heads of the terrorist gangs that plagued Palestine in the 30s and 40s, the Irgun and the Lehi gang, or the Stern gang. Yitzhak Shamir was head of the Stern gang, and Menachem Begin was the head of the Irgun. This is a photograph of Begin's handiwork when he blew up the King David Hotel. This is the Volker Bernadotte, the Swedish mediator who was sent to Palestine to try to make some arrangement whereby the partition plan of 1947 could be put into effect. He was killed. He was murdered by Yitzhak Shamir's gang. As you can see there, the Stern group is blamed. He was killed Bonnie and Clyde style in Jerusalem. He's also the King of Sweden's uncle. And this is the handiwork of Ariel Sharon, the third man in that photograph. This is just the one picture of the Sabra and Shatila massacre in September 1982, when Israeli troops had secured these camps of Palestinian refugees and then sent in the Phalange, the Christian Phalange, who killed all these people for 3 days running with the knives. And thousands of people were killed. And as a result of this atrocity led to the largest protest in Israeli history against the man who was blamed for it. The man who was blamed for it was, of course, the Minister of Defense at the time, Ariel Sharon. And he lost the Kahan Commission. It was commissioned in Israel to find out who was responsible. The Kahan Commission found Ariel Sharon personally responsible for the massacre. He lost his portfolio as Minister of Defense, and they made the recommendation that he never serve in Israeli government again. In the year 2001, he became Prime Minister, which should have been a big red flag for the whole world, because this man was a known genocidaire. He's been committing atrocities like this since he was like 19 years old. His deputy was this fella, Ehud Olmert, who I discovered was in New York City on 9/11. One of their cronies is this man, Benjamin Netanyahu, whose father was basically the director of revisionist Zionism, the NZO, in New York in the 40s. This is why this Bibi Netanyahu speaks English with an American accent, because he went to school in America. Here he is with his father. And this man, Netanyahu, Benjamin Netanyahu, will be coming to the United States this week. I think he's probably already here. He'll be speaking in front of Congress, and there's been a big to-do about that. As I said, his father was the executive director of the New Zionist organization after Vladimir Jabotinsky died in New York in the 40s. Now, to make it understandable, this wing of Zionism is the most radical, most extreme, most violent, most ruthless terrorist part of Zionism. And he's the head of it. His mentor, Jabotinsky, had written a book, an essay in 1923, calling for the construction of an iron wall between the Palestinians and the Israelis. Here's Netanyahu in the Grand Synagogue in Paris about a month ago, waving like he's the savior of the Jewish people. And after this shooting in Paris, he told the French Jews that you should come home to Israel now. You cannot live in France any longer. And this is the same thing he repeated after the Danish attacks. So you have to see, what is the takeaway? What is like the takeaway from these crimes? The takeaway, what you're supposed to get out of it, is that Jews are not safe in Denmark or France. You should go to Israel. So that's kind of like the attitude change that the masters of these crimes wanted to get across. Now here's Netanyahu with his former commander, Ehud Barak. Ehud Barak was former Prime Minister, Secretary of Defense, Chief of Staff. He was also the commander of a covert commando force called the Sayeret Matkal. And when he was the commander of that Sayeret Matkal, covert commando force serving under the Minister of Defense, or the Chief of Defense, Netanyahu was his soldier. So the relationship of these men is commander to soldier. Ehud Barak, when he was Minister of Defense in 2008, 2009, committed this kind of atrocity where he launched missiles of white phosphorus on the civilian population of Palestine, of Gaza. And here's a school, the United Nations school in Gaza, on the receiving end of white phosphorus. And white phosphorus is, of course, a banned weapon because if it strikes you, if it lands on you, it will just burn through your whole body. You can't stop it. So if it lands on your skin, it'll go through the bone and come out the other side. It's hideous. Hideous and banned weapon. It's terrorism. Now, what's interesting about in the 9/11 is that when 9/11 happened, this man, Ehud Barak, was in the studio of BBC World in London giving his analysis of what happened before the towers even fell. And what he said is that the world will never be the same from this day on. He said, we know who's behind this. It's Osama bin Laden. And we know where Osama bin Laden is. He said, now is the time for America to begin an operational war on terror. And that was basically, in a nutshell, what then became the official version for 9/11. And as you know, we went to war in Afghanistan 3 weeks later. And here, I call this the troika of terror. Some people look at this and say, oh, those are Israeli leaders. No, they're terrorists. The first guy here, Shimon Peres, was president of Israel when this photo was taken. He has been involved in bringing illegal weapons to Israel since 1948. And he's also the mastermind of Israel's illegal nuclear arsenal. So you see, maybe a Zionist apologist will say, oh, well, that's a good thing. But other people will say that these are terrorists who have their hands on a nuclear arsenal. So you're talking about, if there's one place in the world where nuclear weapons are in the hands of terrorists, look to Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. This is the former head of the Mossad, Isser Harel, and that's the logo of the Mossad, which says, by deception you shall do war. And in 1979, Isser Harel told an American visitor, missionary, or evangelist, that terrorism would come to the United States and Arabs would attack the tallest buildings in New York City. He said that in 1979, and 22 years later it came true. So he's either amazingly prescient or he's exposing the true source of the terrorism. Here he is in a photograph from earlier. Here he is later in life. And this is the man he told it to, Michael Evans of Texas, who's a Jewish man who's a Christian evangelist and a big supporter of the right-wing Zionist cause. Here he is in 1979 visiting the Netanyahus. Now this is the man on the left is Michael Evans, and he is the one who said after 9/11 that in 1979 the former head of Mossad had told him that prediction. And he was pretty well connected. Here he is meeting with Menachem Begin when Begin was the prime minister. And here he is in 2012 giving a speech in Israel. You can see down here is Glenn Beck and David Barton. These people are what you call Christian Zionists. These are the people who try to, through television audiences, try to inculcate among Christians that their obligation is to support the state of Israel. This fella here is the main Mossad agent in Hollywood. His name is Arnon Milchan. And he produced movies like JFK and Brazil. Here he is with two of his properties, two of the people who work for him. And here he is with the people that he reports to. He's very close to, he calls Shimon Peres his best friend, because Shimon Peres created a secret organization, a secret cabal called Lechem. And Lechem was tasked to obtain in the United States the components for a nuclear arsenal. And they put him in charge, Arnon Milchan. And Arnon Milchan, his very first movie he made was of a plane flying into the Pan Am building. This is in 1978. The film is called The Medusa Touch. Richard Burton was in it. And the climactic scene of the movie is this, where 747 flies into the Pan Am building. This is the cover of the book. Peter van Greenway is not Dutch. He's a nom de plume. He's a Jewish guy. The publisher is a Jewish company. And obviously, Arnon Milchan, who produced the movie, is an Israeli. So this idea of planes flying into buildings was all on the mind of Arnon Milchan. In the year 2000, he made this television show with Rupert Murdoch. It's a spin-off of the X-Files. It's called The Lone Gunman. And in the pilot episode, a 757 or 767 is remotely hijacked. The pilots are flying the plane, but unbeknownst to them, the plane has been remotely hijacked and is being flown into the World Trade Center. At the very last minute, they are able to get control back and pull the plane up, and it just narrowly misses the World Trade Center.